sure the audio is working. Hmm? Hey, Chica.
David, it's just the two of these students, right?
Yes, and the people on live stream. Okay. Literally just had it working. Okay. All right, what's going on here? Okay. Mic's working. Debugging the audio setup.
I've lost all my OBS foo. No help's off there.
Well, it should be coming out of my audio interface here, so. All right, I love my vertical mouse, but it is very easy to knock off. There sure is. Oh, yeah. This, let's see, it's May 6th. Okay. Did you bring your charger this time?
No, but
Oh my god.
I recharged it fully, so.
I brought a USB cable just in case.
All right.
I want to keystone this properly for you guys.
Aw. You're too kind.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. It's like bothers me, so it's a little bit self-interested.
Let's see. 101 session. 2 live stream link.
How was your
Did not get to it. Began it, and then work exploded over the weekend, and I worked over the weekend. So
No.
Oh, wow.
that was not ideal.
I did the opposite. I did it during the workday.
That is the better way
There
to
you
do
go.
things. So I am trying to prevent my team from needing to be laid off. So.
Are you in tech?
Yeah.
Nice. Much better.
Mic, audio, or data? Thanks. Thank you. All right, let me just try. Okay, something's happening.
Are you doing engineering or are you?
I'm sort of the programmer who can also talk to business people.
Okay, that's working. There we go. Okay. Ooh, desktop audio though. Okay, just gotta get the desktop audio going through the stream. Turn that down while we're figuring this out.
quite some drama over avant-garde this weekend.
Oh, really?
Oh,
What happened?
didn't an event get canceled because it's still under construction or something?
Yeah. It's like Sarah Landry's this performing is totally sold out. It's opening weekend. It was supposed to open on the 1st. And they ran right up to that day with the construction. So of course the city wasn't going to turn out a permit in that like,
Damn.
same day.
That's
So
nuts.
they're just waiting on like permitting.
I hope we get it fixed by next week.
Are you going next week?
Underworld. One of my favorite artists ever. Hubristically started trying to think about doing one of their rhythm patterns for the homework and then decided that I should start with the 80s.
Huh.
I realized like it's kind of I was like kind of cheating and looking up how people were recreating songs like on YouTube and stuff because it's actually like I realized I'm not very great at identifying. There's just so much noise to like pick out like the drums and everything. It's so hard.
My brother is a drummer, and so I gave him a call and I was like, what do you hear when you listen to music? And he's like, I cannot convey that to you over the phone. It's like, all right, thanks. We did have fun. I have a friend who's got a little drum machine. And before work exploded over the weekend, went over and was chatting with him. He was like showing how to actually like plug in beats in an old school drum machine, and that was really cool because it immediately grounded what's happening in like 90% of the songs that I listen to. I just don't know how to immediately exactly recreate the sounds, but the process now makes sense.
Was it like the little squares or what did it look like?
Yeah, so probably go.
Let's do this. Okay, so that's working. Okay, so Leslie Able's an audio. It's gonna get me demonetized.
YouTube didn't flag it.
Well, I mean, I'm not even monetized yet, but they might flag the stream, or they might just snip out the audio. Like, why is this not?
In a live stream, I think snipping out is more common, but obviously don't risk your channel for our sake.
It's all good. Okay, my desktop audio is coming through, but not my Ableton audio.
What song were you working on?
Actually, one of them was a Charlie XCX song.
Yeah, we had 2 Charlie XCX
Really?
submissions.
Was that someone else's submission?
Cameron submitted Yuck.
Oh, I saw her last week.
Should just make a new project.
So I was really inspired. I did Guess, which is her song with Billie Eilish. I like it. Yeah, and then the other one I tried was like the Rampa remix of Never Ender. But that one I feel like I didn't do very well at.
Oops.
Guest came on my Discover Weekly while we were traveling last year in Tokyo, and so like I know exactly where I was in the station,
wow.
like when I first heard that beat at the beginning.
And they even say one
Yeah,
song
this is
about
about Tokyo. So
that's so fun.
Yeah, and like 2 weeks later, Underworld released an album that has a track called Tokyo Shinkansen, which was also fun.
Wow.
Didn't listen to it.
Try FL Studio.
It still feels like it was released for you.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, now it's working. All right, maybe I just can't use the Focusrite driver. Y'all hear that blinky, lasery synth sound? I think I got the drivers sorted. Everyone loves BTS content, right? Okay, let's get started. So, welcome to session 2. Last week we talked about drums. we got oriented with Ableton. So now we're going to take things to the next level of songwriting. We're going to talk about how to create an energetic progression so that the song kind of like builds in intensity over time. And we're also going to add the other fundamental element of EDM, which is bass. But before we get into that, let's listen to people's homeworks from last week and talk about how torturous it was to wring these beats from our hands. So I've got, and if anyone hasn't submitted their homework yet, it's fine. If you want to do any late submissions, just post them in the channel or whatever. But we did get a few from various folks, so I'm not going to play the originals on the stream because, again, don't want to get demonetized or whatever copyright takedown. I don't know what YouTube's game is there, but let's start with Chica's first submission, which is based on Guess by Charlie XCX. Wait, hold on. Let me get rid of some of this session ID stuff. Huh.
It might be because I'm like, it's private, so maybe it'll like expired or something.
Oh yeah, maybe try sharing it again. Let's check your second link, which was replicating Neverender by Tame Impala. Actually, I don't think I've heard this one yet, so let's try this one.
It's like a remix of Neverender.
Here we go. Is that coming through? Yeah. Let me turn off the mic too, because sometimes that picks it. We'll listen again. All right, sounds pretty nice. Like the like kind of hi-hat cymbal on the every fourth beat to add some more high-end richness to it, and the offbeat percussive hits are also sound good. I think it might be a little on the bass heavy side. Were you mixing this through headphones by any chance?
I actually wasn't.
Oh, were you mixing it on your computer speakers?
Yeah, just on a laptop.
Ah, okay. Yeah, that's can be a common difficulty with like hearing bass effectively on either headphones or laptop speakers or your cell phone. The antidote to that, other than getting a massive sound system with subs or other specialized equipment, is we can use a reference track, and we kind of level match our kick and snare and hi-hats and so on to what the levels are on the reference track. And you don't have to necessarily do that like early on in the process. You could do it at the very end and be like, oh, yeah, the kick's a little too hot, so I'll bring it down. The hi-hats need to be a little bit more prominent, or sometimes the hi-hats can be too prominent, because oftentimes the more we listen to a track, it starts to kind of all sound the same, or at least we don't know. It's hard for us to tell like how things should sound. So always good to have another track that's mixed the way you like. And that's kind of why I'm pushing on this idea of the reference tracks, the inspiration tracks, because they can help us level up fast.
Does that mean just like opening up something else, like another project in Ableton, or?
Well, one thing you could do here is if you have the MP3 for this remix, and you can look up the tempo. So like you said, it's a Never Ender by the Rampo remix. Oh my God. Sorry, I'm missing the R key on my keyboard, so I can't type R's very well. And we'll say BPM. So it looks like it's in F sharp minor, and it's at 120 beats per minute. So you can do this with pretty much any popular song these days. Just look up the BPM, and so you could bring this into. Oh, it's a Justice track. Nice. Yeah, you can just bring the MP3 of this. You can rip it from YouTube if you want. Bring it into Ableton, and then we'll actually later when we talk more about song structure, that'll be an exercise. We'll basically like bring the track into Ableton, annotate the sections, and then make our own beat and song based on that. So, but yeah, great start here. Did you manage to resend the link for your
I'm
first
sending right
beat.
now. I actually did that with my other song. I did the YouTube to MP3 download, and I looked at the BPM, and I literally pulled it in so I could listen to it right next to it.
Nice.
And I just didn't do it for this one, so maybe I should do that.
Gotcha. Yeah, my Ableton project template, I have a reference group in here so I can bring references in. Usually I keep it muted, of course, when I'm producing, but then at the end I can A/B compare them. Yeah, let's listen to your other beat here. The song is really going off right now. All right, I'm gonna mute my mic. Hell yeah. Sounds awesome. Love the sample selection. It sounds really coherent. And that kick is nice and punchy. I think you matched the tempo well, if I remember. And a lot of I don't know how many of y'all have heard this song, but a lot of the groove comes from that bass line too. So once we start talking about bass today, then we'll basically have the foundation for what about EDM like makes you want to move. So awesome. We're off to the races. Okay. Next up, Cameron submitted a few, so let's check these out. First one, I Like America and America Likes Me by 1975. I remember this one was kind of an atmospheric sort of track. Very nicely done. We got some. We actually have some bass in this one, kind of like an 808 going on there, and nice work with the hi hats. Those little like flourishes really help create that kind of trap hip hop kind of sound. Um, and with this genre, with the hi hats, you can really just push the tempo really fast. Make them 30-second notes, 64th notes, even if you want. Two very minor things I did want to point out. I mentioned this in the feedback, but near the end here, we have a kick playing at the same time as a snare. And if I remember from the original track, the kick and the snare pattern is kind of this like flowing current that sits kind of underneath the track. And when you play the kick and the snare at the same time, it really adds a lot of like power, volume, and it sort of sticks out, which can be good if that's what you're going for. I think in this case, it would be more effective for the kick and the snare to be offset near the end. Creates more of a groovy pattern. That said, stacking the kick and the snare can be a good way to start increasing the energy and going into a sort of build-up section. So it can be a good technique. And there are also definitely, kind of bass-heavy genres where the kick and the snare do line up. Just so y'all hear what I'm talking about, I'll play it here at the end. Yes, if you heard that kick and snare hitting at the same time. And that can also be challenging for your headroom too. Like in these kind of genres, you often have like a really big kick and a really big snare that are really loud and take up a lot of space in the mix. So you don't necessarily want to play them on top. Whereas in house, the clap tends to be a little bit thinner, smaller. So you stack it with the kick and it's all Gucci. The other thing I wanted to point out is an opportunity to add a little bit of dynamics. There's one part here, I think, where we have a kick-kick pattern. And I think it could be very effective to make the second kick a little softer than the first. So it's like, instead of it being like 2 punches to the face, it's like dun dun, and you back off a little bit. And that helps create that sort of flowing groove. Let me play it again for y'all so you can hear what I'm talking about. It's not bad by any means. It's not a wrong artistic choice or anything, but it is an opportunity to, and you might want to do it. You might want to have them play at the same volume if that's what you're going for. But just something to think about. You can always make the second kick a little softer to create a little bit more dynamics, and that's justified by that idea we talked about last week, where um, the drum hits that are on the primary beats in a measure get the most emphasis, and then the other drum beats get a little less emphasis, and that helps create a less robotic kind of sound.
It's cool. I had to remind myself of the track, but it does sound. I can hear it. It sounds like this.
Yeah. Nice work on that beat, Cameron. All right, let's take a look at your second one here. Cool. I don't know why SoundCloud always does that, but all right, here we go. Very nice. I especially like how you completely killed the bass, the low frequencies here in the second hit. That comes up a lot in hip hop music too. I know, everyone has this image of like, a Cadillac or a car or whatever with the bass booming out of it, but a lot of times in trap you want to like leave the bass out to create that sense of anticipation in the listeners, that when it comes back in, it's like, oh yes, there it is. I was missing that. You can do it in even little micro moments like this, where later in the track you add the 808 back in. Also liked your hi-hat sample. I thought it was really crispy and kind of glassy. I thought that was cool. Yeah. No notes. All right, let's look at your third submission here, or listen to it. Oh wait, I think you resent it to me. Hold on one second. Yeah, here we go. Oh yeah, yuck. Nicely done. What to say? Yeah, the clap fills are really nice. Not sure what all you did with the velocities there, but those are another good opportunity to like play the dynamics a little bit. You can also, for like, it felt like you had some nice groove going there. So I don't know if you adjusted the drums like back a little bit or added some swing, but you can always put the drums on the grid and then adjust them ever so slightly over so they're kind of a little bit lazier, and that can help create that laid back sort of groove. Let's just play it again one more time, make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, the like slightly louder open hi-hat I think helped kind of pull the listener along. So that was effective. And yeah, you can also, even though you have the clap on the 2 and the 4, generally speaking, you can also use that same clap to make little drum fills here and there. So I think it's always really effective when you can find a way to reuse some of your source material, so it's not all, so you have kind of like a consistent palette or world that you're creating. It's not, just a bunch of sort of disconnected random sounds. Where we got in the chat? Charlie and George. Nice. Okay, let me see if there's anyone talking on the live stream. All good. Probability or randomness for the velocity. Yes, there is. There's also there's a humanize option in the loops. Let's pull this up here. I think I can do it on audio. Let me send, warp it. 1.5. Actually, no, sorry. I think that's a MIDI option. So let's say I have create a new MIDI track here, and let's just pick a hi-hat sample, for instance. I got closed hi-hat. How about one that's not? Okay, this is fine. All right, and then put it on our MIDI track, and then just draw some notes. Yeah, so you can, you got this. So I don't think we've talked about quantizing yet, but quantize is this option where you can basically, it will come in handy when we're like playing stuff in live ourselves, but it basically, quantize puts everything onto the grid. Humanize adjusts everything off the grid slightly. So you select, select some notes you want to humanize, and you click the humanize button, and then you can see how you can adjust how much you want to humanize it. You can see how it's kind of getting more and more off the grid as I crank this number up. You can of course put it at 0. A little goes a long way here. Like you don't, I mean, maybe you want it to sound sloppy and uncoordinated for some reason, but probably can just start with a touch of it, and then I think it's nice to leave at least the very first hit in your measure right on the grid, because again, that's like the most emphasized, emphatic beat in a measure. So we want it like hitting real hard, and then that gives us some leeway for the rest of the notes in the measure to be a little more loose. And then when the next main hit comes in on the next measure, that can be right on the grid. So that kind of helps create some feeling of stabilization and power, but you still get the organic grooviness on the rest of the notes. And in fact, you could say, just make a single measure, humanize it, and then duplicate that measure. So now you have like a organic but consistent feel, and maybe do it over 2 measures, but that way it'll sound organic but also consistent. So yeah. Chance editor. Where did you see that?
Google.
Oh, Google. Okay, right on. Yeah, so that's one idea for getting a little more flavor out of your drum loops. Cool. Let's see, Cameron's typing. Let's see which. Or not. By the way, if anyone has any questions as they come up, feel free to ask. Or if you have any thoughts about like what transpired while you were putting the beats together, maybe places where you got stuck, feel free to ask as well.
I honestly, for some reason, still didn't totally understand what a MIDI was and didn't even bother with it at all.
Okay.
So I was sitting there thinking, like, I don't really know how to change the tone of anything. I'm just kind of picking the closest sounding audio sample,
Mm-hmm. Were you able to load a sample into the simpler on a MIDI track? Like, were you able to get this?
No.
Okay.
I literally was just chopping them up in the top portion of there.
Okay, right on. Well, that's one good reason to have multiple workflows. But since we'll be building some drum beats today, we'll do it in MIDI. Maybe we'll do it in both just to see the different workflows. But in each lesson, we'll kind of end up reviewing a lot of the fundamentals along the way. So no worries. All right. Next up, we got a submission from Lick, aka Sunshower Power. Oh, Chad Nauseum. Okay, yeah. And let's see, the reference track is Ice Ice Baby. Classic. All right, here we go. Okay, not sure why this isn't playing. Is my internet down?
Stream's still going.
Stream's still going? Okay. Let's try another. Well, this one we already listened to. Let's try. Let's try Emma's track. Let's see if this one loads. Is SoundCloud just having an outage? Do any of my tracks load? Does this track load? Huh. Okay. SoundCloud decided to stop working. Okay, if Emma or Andre wanna just put the MP3s in the Discord. Okay, here we go. All right, here we go. This is Andre's recreation of Ice Ice Baby. Let me try dragging it into Ableton. But you're right, that could definitely be the issue. Let me close some tabs here. All right. Stream is still up, right?
Yes.
Okay. My audio just. Okay, I'm gonna try restarting Ableton. 1 second. Sorry, folks. Actually, I'm just gonna close Ableton and see what happens. If I was on a Mac, this would never have happened. Chrome, of course, is using 2 gigabytes of RAM. Let's see. OBS Studio. Do I have 2 of these open? No? Okay. Anyway. All right, let's try listening to Ice Ice Baby. All right, what's going on? All right, there we go. Or, let's see. Okay, we're good. Okay. Nicely done. Let me pull the stream back up. So I can type there. So I can type there. Mute this. Okay. Yeah, so one thing I really liked is your use of the clap and the snap sample to create a little contrast there. That's always a good instrument to choose to create some variation. I also like how you started off without the kick drum, and then the kick drum comes in halfway through. So oftentimes the intros to songs can be challenging because it's like, all right, I got to start from nothing and get into the track somehow. But starting off with some light drums without the kick gives you somewhere to go as well. So you can always add you can always bring the kick in later. So let's do it one more time because there were a couple things I think about kick drum hits near the end I wanted to touch on. So here we go. Yeah, good use of dynamics actually there. You had some like real strong hits at the beginning, and then you backed off a little bit, and that creates a natural like pull for the listener to want the bigger hits to come back in. It's a nice choice there. Yeah, don't have much more to say, but good job. All right. Next, let's look at MS. Oh yeah, that was very solid. Again, great sample selection, very coherent sounding. I liked the kind of conversation you had going on between the closed hi-hats and the claps. I don't know if that was strictly speaking a call and response kind of vibe, but it has that effect. And that can be a very effective technique where you have like some kind of rhythmic idea and you play it in two different instruments. Either at the same time or at different times. So again, that helps create that feeling of familiarity in the listener, but also adding some variation. So you're not like boring the listener, but you're giving them this consistent sort of world to be in, kind of immersing them. Let me just listen to it one more time because it was so fire. Oh yeah, the song is. Oh yeah, what is Pausa an artist? Is this who we're talking about? I assume yes. Yeah, let's run it back. Dance electronic. Role play, huh? Okay, we should. I should add we should get a playlist going with all the songs that people submit throughout the session, so we'll all discover some new music. I think that'll be fun. All right, let's play one more time. Actually, I think you might have had a small clap on the 2 and the 4, and then like a totally different snare for those fills. That's often an effective technique where you use one snare or clap for your main like kind of keeping the time sort of sample, and then you have another one that comes in and does little fills here and there. So it's another good reason to use like the drum kicks, and you can have a few different samples to choose from. But can you play it again? Oh yeah, Aaron requests another run through. Yeah, so listen for the snare going like, and then the hi-hats going. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's strictly speaking call and response, um, but they are playing similar kind of like 16th note rhythmic patterns at different times, rather than like you wouldn't want to have the snare rolls and the hi-hat rolls happening at the same time. It would be a lot of information to put on the listener's ears. Um, So, and as we did last week, we talked about like having a clean separation in the different jobs that your instruments play. So having too much complexity going on at once can kind of make the listener's attention not know what to focus on. So it can be good to have like one sort of spotlight element at a time, maybe two tops if they're kind of like weaving in and around each other. How important would you rank this in the beat? I mean, that would depend on important by what standards. It's definitely good for creating some more rhythmic interest. Like, it could have just had doonts, 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 for instance. Maybe that's okay. Maybe at times you want a very simple beat. But especially at like the beginning of a track, you might want to have something a little more active happening just to draw the listener in. Like, imagine you were playing this song, you're hearing the song on your Discover Weekly playlist on Spotify, and they just started it off, dunce, 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 dunce. That might not really catch your attention as much as a beat that has a little bit more going on, even if it's not like, your whole song just yet. But if you're trying to make music that's just kind of in the background, maybe you don't want something as attention grabbing. So it kind of depends on what you're going for here. If that makes sense. Cool. All right. Well, thank you everyone who submitted homework. If you didn't submit homework, all good. There's no grades here. There is a final project. We're gonna try to make. We haven't managed to do it in the previous classes quite yet, but I believe in y'all. We're gonna make a class EP. We're each gonna submit a track, and yeah. But today, let's dive into the world of bass. So, like I said, I think bass is the kind of the other critical element to an EDM track besides the kick, right? The kick is your lowest pitched percussive element in a track. The bass is the lowest pitched tonal element in a track. And it's also the most sensory sort of the frequencies, right? Like, it's what you feel more so than hearing, right? Because at some point, as the frequencies get lower and lower, even below 20 hertz, you can't even hear them anymore. But you can still feel them. Like, we can feel the rumble of a train going by, even if we can't, hear it. So if you have the kick and the bass, you have everything you need to create a really embodied sensory sort of groove that gets people to dance, which is what we're all going for here. And it can be very effective in your tracks to break things down at points to just the kick and the bass, right? Like kind of a cool off section, or maybe you're trying to start from somewhere and you don't want to just have all your energy going at once. So you just have the kick and the bass going, and that's enough to have something danceable going on.
What was the shortcut to change from this view to that view?
Oh, right. If you're stuck in the mixer view, I forget what they call it exactly in the manual, but you can press tab. Excuse me, and that toggles between the two. All right, let's hope that my Ableton audio is working again. So the simplest possible bass line you can have is, well, no bass line, but also just a single note playing. You're holding it down. And you have a kick drum pattern going. So let's get a we're gonna make a house beat again. So let's get a kick sample of your choice. I want something like something a little tighter. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Put it on a new MIDI track. So Control-Shift-T or Command-Shift-T if you're on Mac. And then take your kick sample and drag it into that drop instrument here section of your of the bottom lane. And that'll create a new sampler. You can also, oh no, you can't. You'd think they'd make it so you could click and drag it into the list of tracks and it would make a new track, but sadly no. And we're gonna make one measure of 4 on the floor. So create a new MIDI clip here. So select this. Select one measure. We can zoom in here. Control-Shift-M to enter a new MIDI clip. and then change your grid to 1/4 just so it's easy to see, and then draw in 4 quarter notes. So quick review of what we did last week. And now let's also turn the tempo up to 128 because it's good tempo for house music. Sounds like this. Great. All right, now we're going to get a synth we haven't looked at yet. It's called Drift, and it comes with Ableton. And normally I wouldn't use this synth. There are free options out there like Vital that we'll look at in a later session that I prefer, and I have some other paid options that I like. But I'm choosing this one just because it's I think it comes with Ableton Lite, so people with that version will also have access to it. So search for Drift in your toolbox here on the side panel, and then if you drag this one into the area below your tracks, it should create a new MIDI track. So you get this, right? Is everyone able to do that? Or anyone couldn't do that? So when you load it in, you get this default sound. Sounds like that. It's already kind of bassy, which is great if you play it in a low enough octave. There is one thing I don't like about it, which is that so you can see they have like oscillator 1, that's what OSC stands for. It's a saw wave, which is what's giving it that buzzy, bright character. And then it's got oscillator 2 here, which is a sine wave, which is the most fundamental sound you can create. Joseph Fourier proved in the 1800s that any sound in the real world can be mathematically decomposed into a summation of these sine waves. So you can think of it as like a pure tone. It's the simplest possible sound you can have that can be called a sound, if that makes sense. It plays at exactly one frequency.
How did you get to the drift again? Sorry, one more time.
Yeah, so if you can get to Drift, you go up here and just search for Drift. I think it's under, and then it should show up in your results. Oh, wait, you're on an older version of Ableton. Okay. Do you have Operator?
I think so.
Okay. Operator is another option depending on.
Like what category? I don't have an all, so what category would it be? Is this a sound? Is it an instrument?
This is going to be a instrument.
Okay, I found it.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Yeah, for the next, I think at some point we'll install Vital, and then we'll all be on the same page. But yeah, so we got Drift. So even before we do anything, I want y'all to change the octave of the sine wave to 0. So that way it matches the saw. Just twiddle this knob down here. Oh, no, we're gonna let's do that. So now I've got a nice, if you're using, as a reminder, you can use your laptop keyboard to play the notes. You toggle this keyboard icon on and off with the M button, and you can move the octave of your keyboard down by pressing Z a few times, and then you can move it up by pressing X, but we want it to be pretty low. There's a sweet spot. So to further break down what exactly is going on here, this oscillator 2 is functioning as what's called the sub-bass. So there's a set of frequencies that are kind of like a sweet spot for where you want your absolute lowest tonal note sitting, because it will sound both powerful, it won't sound tinny or weak from being too high, and it won't sound flabby or quiet because it's too low. And there's a chart which I'll paste into the Discord. Sub-frequency note. Oh, sorry. How long has that been muted? Oops. Okay. Sorry. Let me just re-explain that real quick. In this green region, these are the frequencies for the most powerful sub-bass notes that you generally want to go for. So um, if you pick notes that are in this pink region, they can be okay. Like a human could in theory hear them, but speakers in general won't be able to reproduce them very well or powerfully. And then if you start going up too high into this orange region, it's not going to have that like weight or that punch or that hit you in the guts feeling that you want from a proper sub bass note. And as I mentioned before, the sub bass is like your absolute lowest component of bass. Generally, you can't even, like if you just play the sub by itself, you might not even really hear it all that well. So you'll typically want to add additional higher frequencies that help the bass kind of punch through and be more audible. But getting the sub note right is important for making the sound feel full and punchy and sensory in your body. so that's why I moved the octave of my synth down to where it is now. You can hear it here. You should be able to hear it, I think. Oh, that's too low. So you hear that like sound. That's not what we want. We need it to be an octave higher. So something like this. Okay, that's coming through. Good. Yeah. So
So does the 0 correspond in the chart to the pink line?
So 0, 1, 2, 3. So those are part of the names of the notes. So if we go into our MIDI clip for the kick, you may remember that I said that C3 is the middle C note where it'll play back the sample at its original pitch. So C3 here is the same as like C3 here. So I think Ableton may actually be off by 1 from the standard note number chart. We'll find out here in a second. So I'm gonna, now that we all have our basic bass synth set up, we're gonna add another MIDI clip here to go along with the kick. And we're just gonna, let's see. So in this case, so this is an F0. So that's actually, on the chart it's F1. In Ableton it's an F0. So that's the only quirky thing about Ableton. But so we're just gonna press B to switch to the pencil tool, draw a note here at the beginning, and then you can go ahead and drag it all the way over. So it's like one solid note that lasts one measure. Let's see, I heard the Discord go off. Oh, sweet. Perfect. Thank you, Karen.
Is there a reason that after adjusting the octave, my MIDI is still it's like still very high pitched notes?
Oh,
I just had this. But
okay. Let's see, you got that. Okay, change that to 0. Yeah.
Maybe I changed it and it wasn't like in the.
Click and drag up, maybe. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Oh, so this 4 on the 4 pattern, you're gonna want to use a kick sample for that.
Oh.
You're gonna want to put drift on a separate MIDI channel.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just I'll play what that sounds like here. So this is not. So we're gonna do another producer trick, a really important one here in a second. But so after adding this note, we get a sound like this. All right. I don't know if you can tell, but that doesn't sound very good. And the reason why is that the kick is a low frequency sound, the bass is a low frequency sound, so you've got all this competition for space in the low frequency register. And furthermore, the bass is just kind of playing this like one steady note. There's no rhythm to it, so it's like kind of obnoxious in a way. I'll play it one more time just so you know what we never want to hear. So what would be nice is if we could get the bass to duck out of the way of the kick when the kick hits. And there are a lot of ways to do that, but we're going to do it the most classic way, which is through what's called sidechain compression. All right, before we go into that, has everyone gotten this 4 on the floor kick drum and then the single low bass note setup with drift? Or anyone hasn't gotten that yet? You got it? They're still working on it? Let's see. So you got a kick, that's great. Good start.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I put the drift into new.
Yeah. Wait, how come you're not getting
Oh, I think so.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Yep.
And then I should.
Great. That's to 0.
Okay.
And
And then it should just sound.
well, you're gonna need to drop a MIDI note.
Oh, here.
Yeah. Right? It's like control command shift now. I think you can probably 2-finger click. And then pick a low note like an F. Oh, you don't have to select anything. Pick an F0. Yeah, just scroll up a little bit and switch to the. Scroll down a bit.
Oh, I see.
You're on C6, so get out there like zeros. Yep, there you go. And then switch to your pencil tool with the B button. There you go. There. Oh no. So we just want one note. So get rid of the other 3. There you go. And then put your cursor on the right side of the note there and click and drag that all the way to the end. So I've got one a whole note that lasts all note. Cool. All right. So now we all have this obnoxious kick and bass sound. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a compressor effect to our bass channel. And every version of Ableton should come with a compressor. Some of them also have this one called glue compressor, which is it's like an emulation of some old analog equipment, but we can just use the regular compressor. And then this is an audio effect. So we're gonna drag it so it's after our bass here, right? So what is a compressor? A compressor takes an audio signal, and when the volume crosses a threshold, it starts reducing the volume of the signal. So it basically overall compresses the dynamic range of a signal. So if you had like a lot of spikes up and down in volume, the compressor would reduce those spikes. We're going to use it in sort of there's like a technical reason to do this and a creative reason. The technical reason is we want to make space for the kick to come through in the low register. And the artistic reason is to create this sort of like rhythmic pumping sound, which is like the signature sound used throughout all EDM pretty much. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a song that doesn't use this technique. But you're going to bring the compressor onto your bass channel, and then you click this little triangle button here, and that opens up. This is a common UI element on Ableton effects. This will open up some more tools here. And we're going to click this button here that says sidechain. So that turns on the sidechain. So what sidechaining is instead of having the audio signal that we're compressing trigger the compressor, we're going to have a different audio signal trigger the compressor. And I renamed my track up here from to kick. So if we turn on the sidechain and we change this audio from to kick, now whenever the kick hits and it crosses the threshold, the compressor is going to lower the volume of the bass. So this is exactly what we want, right? Like when the kick's hitting, the bass gets out of the way, it ducks, it reduces the volume, and then it will come back, it will bloom back into place because the kick is a short percussive kind of sound. When it's not playing, we want that bass to fill in the space. So, but when we first turn it on, you won't hear any difference. And that's because the threshold is all the way up here at 0 dB. So even though the kick is hitting, it's not crossing the threshold, so it's not doing anything to the bass signal. So all we've got to do is bring the threshold down. And actually, I'm gonna loop this one beat section so that we can dial it in, because this is gonna be one of those things that you're gonna want to adjust to taste. Because sometimes you want like a really intense sidechain compression, and sometimes you want a more chilled out version. But once you bring the threshold down, you can start adjusting it to your taste. Right? You're hearing it now? Makes you want to start pumping your fists. If I take the compressor off, hear how it sounds originally. And then when I turn it back on, right? So we're going to use this in some other ways throughout the class, but you won't pass the final if you do not know how to set up side chaining from the kick to the bass. So really important that everyone gets this. Is anyone having trouble dialing this in? And I wonder if I can get back to that behind the scenes view. Okay. Is anyone having trouble dialing this in? All right, I don't see any. Oh wait, y'all are on a little bit of a delay, so. All right, I'm gonna assume from the silence that everyone was able to set that up. You got it? Okay, great. Cool. And then just a couple other minor details. Oh, there we go. Good here. All right, thank you, Cameron.
In YouTube chat, Andre says, can you show again how to connect the compressor on the bass and kick?
Oh yeah, thank you, Cameron. Yep, sorry, mute this. Okay. Yep, let me run that back. All right, so I'll delete the compressor. All right. So find your compressor in your palette of tools here. And, drag it in after your drift synth. And then click this triangle button here to open up the side panel on the compressor. And then click the sidechain button. And then change the audio from. So if you you could sidechain the bass to itself, but it's not going to do anything, or it's not going to act any different than a normal compressor. So you want the audio from to be this kick channel. And then while I'm here, I'll point out that I typically like, for sidechaining the kick, I typically like to use this pre-effects option. And the reason for that is there are times when you want to silence the kick, but you still want that pumping sound. So if we make sure the input is coming pre-effects, then later we can add a utility to bring the volume to 0 on the kick. But because we're getting the signal before all the effects turn on, it'll still be triggering the compressor. We'll still get that vroom, 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 vroom kind of sound. Andre, were you able to follow that this time? And in fact, we should have time to demonstrate that.
So the order of all the stuff in the bottom here, are these all effects or what?
Let's see.
So like,
So you've got drift.
like the order matters.
Yeah, so I don't think Ableton will even let you put the compressor before drift because it's a MIDI channel. So, and the compressor is an audio effect, so it needs the audio output from the synth to do anything. So, in this case, it doesn't matter too much if your compressor is before or after your EQ, because we're not really doing anything with the EQ. But you do need the compressor after the synth to make it work.
This may sound like a silly question, but
No silly questions.
what makes this a bass? Like, is it just the drift that effect that was added to the kick? Like, what exactly makes it a bass?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a bass because it is playing the role of the bass frequencies, or it's filling out the. If you think of the overall spectrum of our song from 20 to 20,000 hertz, where the bass is, its job is to fill in the low frequencies, let's say between 20 and 200 hertz mainly. And there are different kinds of bass sounds. You know, you could have like a pluckier bass that's more like in rock music where you have like a dun 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 kind of bass. You could have an 808 bass, which is kind of like which we'll get into. I think hopefully we'll have time today to cover it. But it's mainly because it's just fulfilling the function of covering the low frequencies in our track, and that's why we're playing such a low note on the synth, so that it is, like you can see on the EQ here, like it's really down here in this 43 hertz region. No other instrument is gonna be playing down there. There's not really a lot of space in the low registers. You don't want to. The human ear has trouble detecting a lot of complexity in the bass register because you need more time. You literally need more time for the waveform to play out to be able to detect differences. Whereas in the upper registers, 1 hertz can, or a few hertz can be detected more easily. So you have a lot more freedom to add complexity in your timbres up there. In the bass, you typically need to keep it simpler and less complex because you have less room to operate in, and you don't want to confuse the listener, or really you don't want to take away from the power of the low frequencies. If that makes sense.
Another silly question.
Sure.
With this, I guess I'm having a hard time telling to what is like adding like a filter or effect versus what is adding like sounds. Is our bass here, like, would it sound like anything without the kick, or is it its own sound? Like, if you muted the kick, what would it sound like?
If you muted the kick, we'll play it. Yeah, so if we completely mute the kick, the side chain's no longer going. Unless we could mute it using the utility. I put a utility at the end of my tracks by default, so you can bring it to 0. And because we set the sidechain compressor in pre-FX mode, we'll still get the pumping sound, right?
So like what we've done with this second channel is basically just like holding down a key on a synthesizer, like on a keyboard.
Yeah, we're just holding down that low F, and right. So I've muted the kick, but the sidechain is still going. And then Aaron, you asked, what about bass licks? Are they not considered bass anymore? No, the bass can play, fast notes up top too. You even have some room to like get away with, playing low notes in quick succession. You wouldn't want to play chords too often in the low register because they will sound muddy. I think too, like the name bass is derived from like the bass guitar or the bass instrument in an orchestra. That's the lowest pitched string instrument. And again, if you're trying to play a lot of super fast licks in the lowest parts of the bass register, it's going to sound muddy and kind of incoherent. You can go up higher, Victor Wooten or slap bass, people that play bass with like slap technique, they're getting into those upper registers for sure. And we'll also talk about mid bass. So this is like a layer you can add onto your sub bass to add some grit, some crunch, texture, character, and just to make it sound more prominent in the listener's ear. So I guess maybe if I'm making a really tight distinction here, the sub bass, you typically won't have a whole lot of activity going on because you just want it to like give that feeling. You want it to like hit people's bodies, and then the higher frequency bass stuff, you know, it would play the same notes as the sub bass, but it will you know, have more high frequencies in it, so it comes through more. But yeah, in general, you'll generally have your more complicated motion happening in the upper frequencies and your less complicated motion happening in your lower registers. But you know, at the end of the day, if it sounds good, it is good. So if you get your bass line cooking, don't be hemmed in by rules. I'm kind of giving you some general principles as a starting point, and then you can, of course, complexify them from there. All right. So we've talked about bass a little bit. Let's take our beat a little bit further here. So one thing you generally want to do in an EDM track is create a energetic progression. So you want the track to get more energized over time, especially if you're in like a drop section. So this is like kind of the section of your song that's the most intense, that people are dancing the hardest to. You generally want to start it off with some degree of intensity, and then you'll gradually like bring it up more and more, so people feel more energy growing over time. They won't get bored because you're keeping things all at the same tempo, at the same energy level. And I'll refine this concept of energy over time as well, of course. But basically, it means you want to add more elements into your track over time. So things kind of change, evolve, get bigger, more intense. And typical way to do that here we've talked about a few different drum sounds so far. We've got kicks, claps, hi-hats. So we're basically going to like add more drums to our basic beat, and you'll see how it kind of pulls the listener forward and creates a sense of progression to the song. So let's duplicate our 4 on the floor kick drum pattern. So we're gonna make let's see. We'll start off with making an 8-bar loop. So in EDM, you have a lot of phrases that are 8 measures long, and then you build these into larger sections of like 16 or 32 measures. Typical length for a drop, the most energetic part of the song would be 32 measures. Though, one of my songs, the drop is I think only 8 measures long, and then the second one is longer. But let's just duplicate our 4 on the floor kick drum pattern so it spans 8 measures here. So in this case, 17 to 25. And we'll do the same thing with our bass note here. Sorry, just some messages. So now we've got 8 measures of this kick and bass, but honestly, this is going to start to sound boring real fast. Right, sorry, let me bring the kick back online here. Right, like the listener is, good point, Adam. All right, so we're already getting kind of bored here with this kick and bass pattern. So we need to add in a new element to keep the listener engaged. So a lot of different ways we could do that. The way I'm going to do it is let's add a clap starting at measure 4. We'll add a clap on the 2 and the 4. So pick a clap sample out. And you can do this in MIDI or audio, whichever you like. That's good enough, actually. I like that one. Okay, so we'll just play the kick and the bass for the first 4 measures, and then starting at measure, in my case 21, we'll start adding the clap on the 2 and the 4. So if you need to zoom in so you can see this 0.2, that's where the second beat of that measure is. And we'll select this and duplicate it. Now it's on the 2 and the 4 here. And then we can select that whole measure and duplicate it 4 times. So now we've got, kick in the bass, and then at halfway through we add in this clap sample, right? So if you do that right, it sounds like this. Okay. Still fairly boring, but we're at least getting somewhere, right? Like, clearly when the clap came in, we stepped things up a notch, right? So it's a little more interesting. And then we're going to go on to the next. We're going to go on to the next set of 8 measures. Every 8 measures. This is one of those sort of general principles that you can, of course, break down the road. But it's nice to add a little fill, a turnaround, something to kind of break up the monotony of the beat a little bit to keep the listener engaged. One way I like to think about it is you're sort of reloading a gun. like nothing in nature has an unlimited amount of energy to just like infinitely spray out into its environment, right? So, you're sending this energy out, and then you have to kind of pull back to reload, and then you can send out more in a second. So the way that manifests for me a lot is with like a little turnaround or a drum fill or some other kind of fill. So a really simple one. We're going to select our last little set of 4 kicks here, and change your grid size to 1/8, and we're gonna make this last kick drum 2 1/8 notes instead of 1/4 note. There we go. So now it'll be like dun 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 dun, and then it will pick back up again. So I'm not gonna play through that whole 8 measures again because that's gonna bring me bored. But and by the way, another thing that's making this also sound repetitive is that our bass sound itself is very static. So I didn't take any time to like program an interesting bass sound here. So it's just for demonstration purposes. But one thing you could do is if you open up Drift, you have this mode. You can change poly to unison. And now what it's going to do is it's going to stack several copies of these oscillators together, and it's going to slightly detune them, and it's going to create this richer sort of swirling, detuned sort of sound. It sounds like this. You can crank up the unison, and you get a more rich and watery sort of bass sound. This is called a Reese, R-E-E-S-E. It's a extremely common sound that you'll hear in all sorts of productions and in all sorts of variations. But we'll get more into like bass sound programming later. But you can add a little bit of unison just to make it a little bit more interesting. So anyway, let's look at this this little turnaround we added here. If you added those 2 1/8 notes correctly, you should get something like this. Bring the bass down a little bit.
Did you do that within the?
And clap down too.
Down here?
When I added that second 1/8 note.
Yeah.
So I went to my last set of 4 here, and originally it was just 4 quarter notes, and I changed my grid to 1/8, and then I just typed in 2 1/8 notes. Why does it get so quiet? So that kind of helps keep the energy going. This sort of like turnaround idea. All right. So now let's keep our groove going. We're gonna add another element. Let's add the open hi-hat on every other eighth note. We're also gonna keep our claps going. So let's duplicate our clap section here, another 4 measures. Let's duplicate our bass, another 4 measures. We don't want the drum fill for this next set of 4, so just grab the first 4 sets of kicks here and paste them here. Rename this to clap. And I'm going to select an open hat sample. That's good enough. And I'm going to put it on every other eighth note. So you may have to zoom in a bit. Put it on every other eighth note, like so. I'm also going to shorten it so it doesn't bleed into the next section. Sometimes you may want the hat to be a little looser and like play out more. I'm going to keep it real tight here. So you can see 1/8, and then just duplicate this a whole bunch of times. And by the way, in some of y'all's example beats, you had some nice like hi-hat fills and snare fills and so on. That can be, I'm kind of laying out the skeleton of the track here, but adding in those extra little flourishes are kind of what gives the track its character and makes people want to like listen to it specifically. So, but it can be helpful. I like to, sketch in broad strokes first and then go in and fill in the details, because often once you get kind of a basic groove cooking, it'll spur new creative ideas in your mind, and it just helps keep your creativity going. So if you add your hats in here, I'll play with the turnaround so you can hear what that sounds like. And actually, this could be, we may also want to bring in the closed hat here at this point. Not doing like a bunch of 16th notes, but just to help emphasize the kick a bit more, right? Because like we'll just put it 4x4 the same as the kick, but that extra top layer of the hi-hat will help make the kick sound a bit punchier, and will also create that step up in energy level, because now the kick is like a little bit brighter, a little bit punchier. So let's grab a closed hat and bring it in 4x4 here. Sure. I'll rename the tracks here. Print it all the way to the end. So now you should hear now the kick sounds a bit crisper and punchier with this. Let's see. Aaron asks. So that first hat I added, this one that's on every other eighth note, this is an open hat. It sounds looser and splashier. And then this one here is the closed hat, so it sounds shorter, more like a little tick.
And we don't have to worry about it being the same time as
the kick. Oh yeah, so it does. You're right that Chica points out that we do have the closed hat overlapping with the clap as well. So in this case, it doesn't really matter too much, because the closed hat is really high up here in the frequency spectrum, right? It's like mostly hitting at 9, 10K. The clap is more a mid-range instrument. I mean, it's definitely got some upper register stuff, but they have enough separation between them that we can play them all at the same time, and it should work out. So now that we have this closed hat to add some more punch to the kick, we get this kind of sound. You'll hear it without in the first half without the hi-hat, and then the second half when it comes in. So here we go. Okay. Yeah, for some reason, whenever I mute my mic now, it causes Ableton to stop playing. So whatever. Okay. So we can keep it going. Let's add a little bit more energy into the mix with some extra hi-hat notes. And by the way, when I say, energy can come in a lot of different forms. It can be extra high frequency sounds, let's say like this hi-hat or a clap, or it can be extra motion in a single sample. Like, for instance, you can see that the hat's playing 4 times in a single measure. If we have it playing 16 times in a single measure, that's faster. That's higher frequency energy. And in nature, it takes more energy to sustain high frequencies at the same amplitude as lower frequencies. So when we hear more motion or high frequencies coming into play, we perceive that as just a more energetic sound. And that's not even getting into the so-called Fletcher-Munson curve or the equal loudness curve. We'll talk about that maybe when we get to vocals. But so we can add energy either by adding in more high frequency sounds or making the sounds we already have play faster, play at a faster rate. So let's go ahead and copy. Let's go ahead and duplicate all of this, another four measures. And now we're gonna, we still want to give ourselves some space to push it further. So let's switch to 16th notes on our grid, and we'll make our open hat play 2 16th notes here. So and also, for dynamics reasons, let's make this second closed hat a little quieter. You can make it quieter by double clicking on the sample, and then you should get this gain slider here. We can bring it down, let's say -3 decibels or so. You don't want to overdo it, but -3 is good. You can see I'm doing that. So I'll just to make this explicit, I'll annotate this as 2/4, and then this is 3/4. So it's 1/4. Sorry, I'm a software engineer, so I start counting from 0. So once we get to this last set of 4 measures, start adding in that extra 16th note, and we'll just copy that all the way to the end. And if you do that right, you get this kind of sound. Okay. And if you did that with and if you were using MIDI for your closed hi-hats, you would just you would play 2 MIDI 8th notes. So something like this, just for illustration purposes. C3, C3. Sorry, you would make 2 16th notes, right? So it would look like this, and then you'd copy that all the way to the end. All right, so for those of you who know how to count to 8, you may realize that we're coming to our second set of 8 here. So let's do another turnaround, but this time, instead of adding in a second note or a second kick drum note, let's just pull the kick out completely. And this is kind of like, pulling out the bass, but we're going to pull out this kick drum element that our listener has gotten used to, in which they really they'll start yearning for it once we take it away from them for a second, and then once it comes back in on our next set of 8 bars. Sorry, I got a text. Once we bring the kick back in on our next set of 8 measures, it'll be that much more impactful. So all you got to do for this is select your last set of kick drum notes and press the 0 key. And that will, actually, sorry, no. Sorry, we don't want to do that because that's going to mess up our side chaining on the bass, right? So what we actually need to do is talk about a new concept called automation. So what is automation? Automation is basically programming in changes in parameters in the effects or the synths or anything in the system you want to automate to change over time. So I already have this preset on my track, but if you don't have it already, get a utility effect from your side panel and put it on your kick channel and put it at the end after all the other effects. Then once you've done that, right click on the gain knob and select show automation. And that'll cause a bunch of these like orange dotted lines to show up. And you'll see that here in your kick track, it says utility. That's the effect we're changing or automating. And then we have this second drop down, which says gain. These are all the different parameters you could change. We're going to change the gain. Basically, we want to bring the gain to 0 for this last measure. So we can't hear the kick drum. But because we set up our compressor in pre-effects mode, the kick will still come through and trigger our sidechain. So we'll still get that pumping bass sound. It won't just sound static all of a sudden. In fact, let me just show you real quick what it sounds like if we don't do that.
And
Question, Adam?
And then can we replay how to start doing this automation thing?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so first I'm going to do it the naive way, like just taking out the kick, and you'll hear how it's revolting. Here we go. I mean, it's not terrible, but it clearly it changes something up in the bass that we don't necessarily want to change, right? Like we want that pumping sound. And in fact, I'm gonna bring up the volume of the bass a little bit more just so we can really hear what I'm talking about. Maybe it's not so bad, but so let's bring that back online. And now I'll show again how to do this automation. So right click on the gain knob, bring a utility onto your kick channel if you don't have one already. So utility is a very basic effect. Put it in your favorites so you can have access to it. And then any parameter on any effect, you can use this UI gesture. You right click, or I guess on Mac you 2-finger click it with your trackpad, and then you click show automation, and then it brings the automation layer to the front, which by the way you can toggle with the A key, A for automation. And then make sure you got the utility effect selected here, and then you've got the gain parameter selected here. And then just like with drawing notes on the MIDI channel, we can press the B key to switch to, there's 2 different ways you can do it. You could press the B key and switch to the pencil tool, and you can draw in a line that looks like this, like so. Or you can have the arrow tool and you put a node, you click and put a node here, and you click and put a node there, and you click in the middle, create a new node and drag it to the left, create a new node, drag it to the right. I'll just do that again. So with the pencil tool, you can just click, click and, got the wrong one, okay. Add my utility back, right click automate, okay. So you can, pencil tool, you can click and draw in a shape. We want it all the way down to the 0. Or with the arrow selector tool, you can put a node, click and put a node at the beginning, the end, and then click to add one in the middle and drag it to the left and all the way down, and to the right and all the way down. So now we create this, this box shape where we automate the volume to drop to 0 and stay at 0 and then go back up. And because it's a computer, we can make these kind of like instantaneous movements, right? Like it'll get to 0 before the kick drum plays at all here. So if you did that right, you should get. I'm going to switch back to the non-unison bass just so you can kind of hear it better. But if you do it right, you get a sound like this. Right? And you may even, depending on what you're going for, you may even want to have the last 2 measures, have no kick out. So you can, click and drag your node here, and then click and drag this node over there, and now we're pulling out the kick for 2 whole measures, and that can be pretty effective. Or maybe you throw in an additional drum. Maybe you throw in an additional drum fill there. All right, still doing good on time. Let's see. All right, so now if we want to keep pushing this idea further, we gotta think of some more ways to up the energy. But let's also let's add a new instrument that we haven't talked about yet. I think the cymbal. So crash cymbals can be really effective ways to like really add some emphasis to key beats in your track. You don't necessarily want to be like playing the cymbal constantly, but crash cymbal can be used really well for like every 8 or every 16 measures to emphasize that beat and sort of really put a bow on the fact that you're starting this next round of sounds here. So I think you should have some crash cymbals in some of those sample packs that y'all downloaded. There should be some built into Ableton as well. That's a nice one. So I'm going to just put it right at the beginning of where my next set of measures is coming in. And so now I'm going to just copy and paste my 4 on the floor beat. I'm going to copy and paste my bass. I'm going to bring in the claps again. I'm going to bring in the open and closed hi-hats. Duplicate those. But I also want to up the energy even further. So lots of different ways I could do that. I'm actually going to change up the bass pattern. So I'm going to add some more motion into our bass line. So now it's not just a static note. It's going to be, we'll do some like alternating octaves. So select your first bass note and take the end and drag it back to the beginning, so it's just a single quarter note. And then duplicate that. And then we'll want to make it go up an octave, so hold down Shift. Like while you have the note selected, hold down Shift and press the up arrow key. So normally if you don't have the Shift button selected, you're only moving it a half step at a time. But we want to move it a whole octave. And what is an octave? An octave is the distance between 2 notes such that the frequency of the higher note is twice that of the lower note. And so it sounds at the same pitch. So these are both going to be Fs, but this second F is an octave higher. And you may be thinking like, oh, didn't you just say that we need, our sub bass needs to be in that low, in that sweet spot the whole time? Well, in this case, we're, our home note here on the most emphatic beat in the measure is still playing that really powerful sub note. But now we step away for a beat, and we're still pretty low in the overall frequency spectrum, so we're still functioning as a bass. But now we're adding this kind of like back and forth motion, and I'm not saying this is like an especially good bass line, but it'll work for our purposes. So we also might need, I haven't tried this yet, so we might need, but go ahead and take your 2 octave notes and duplicate them as well. So now it's going to go do 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 do, and then of course duplicate those 4 times. Is everyone able to get that? If you do it right, it should sound like this. All right, again, pretty boring sounding bass line, but it does at least create more interest and changes up or it adds more energy into the mix. If I was making this, I'd probably want to like change up the pattern a little bit, like something a little bit more interesting.
Mine, I don't know. I did this at some point, but I think it's just all one. It's like not 4 different ones.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's first turn off the automation. Okay. And then I guess.
Oh, did I do something wrong with the bass there?
No, I think you're okay. Let's see. I'm just gonna slide everything over so it's more aligned. Now you can kind of see like the dark gray and the light gray alternate every 4 measures. So that's kind of how I like to line up. Okay. And then, so we're here. And then, so you just need, so now you just need to take this note and then select the edge here and drag it all the way up. Okay. Yeah, so just to replay that, we transformed this long note, that's what we had before, and we selected it, put our cursor at the very end of the note here and clicked and dragged it, so now it's only a single beat long. And then we have it selected, we duplicate it, we hold down Shift and press the up arrow to move it up an octave, and then we can duplicate this. In fact, what I would probably, to make it a little bit more interesting, let's take this second pattern and we're gonna shorten the last high note so it's only 1/8 note long, and then we'll duplicate it, and then we'll bring it back down an octave. So now it goes da 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 da, and that'll help make it not so annoying to listen to over and over again. So we'll duplicate that. All right. So here we go. That sounds like this. Okay. And then we want to increase the energy a little bit more. And another thing to point out too is, every 4 measures I'm adding in some new element or changing it up in a slight way. On the alternating 4 measures, I'm only adding a little bit more energy in. But on the primary groups of 4, I'm adding a lot more energy in. So here at this 2/4, I add the open hat and the closed hat, and then for the this 4th group of 4 beats, I add just a little bit more energy by bringing in the second closed hat note. So same idea behind emphasizing the main beats of our track, based on powers of 2. We also I think it is effective to add energy in, add more energy in on the main beats of our, or main measures of our track, and then add less energy in on those alternating sections. Again, all based on powers of 2. So to that end, I might just add the last missing 16th note here. So I'm gonna select all that, select all 4 of those measures, duplicate them, and then I'm gonna take my second closed hi-hat note and put it here on the 4th 16th note in the measure, and then I'm gonna duplicate that all the way to the end. I'll show that again. So, okay, so here's this is the beginning of my second group of 16 measures. So I've got 4 measures copied here, Control D to duplicate. And I go into my closed hats and I select this. This is the quieter one. So I'm going to put it on the 4th 16th note in this group of 4. And again, not lining it up with the open hat because I don't want them to fight. And then I take my group of 3 closed hats here and paste them, or duplicate them all the way to the end. So now it's like, and by the way, I would use, you would have like a vocal or a lead or some kind of like main element playing here. This is all sort of like the background or the context or the soup that our main idea is going to be cooking in. But getting these fundamental structures right will set us up for having a really great track overall. And it makes it easier to drop in new ideas too if you already have the backbone of your track in place. So if you do that right, you get a sound like this. Right, so now we have even more energy in the space with this 16th note hi-hats. So last time we had a fill, we used a fill from the kick drum, right? We did that dun 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 thing. Actually, sorry, before I go on, was everyone able to subsequently add the last 16th note? Okay. So let's look at this clap here, right? So clap, doom, clap, clap, clap. Let's take the clap. It's on the 4th beat, right? Now let's, another simple drum fills, we can just take this clap and put it on the last 2 16ths as well. So it'll go like doom, clap, 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 right? Real simple stuff, but you don't always have to do, and I tend to prefer doing the simplest thing that could possibly work. You can always add more complexity later, but you don't want to spend a lot of time making a super complicated idea that no one's really going to hear, or it's going to be very transient. So you might as well just do something simple that works, and later you can come back and zhuzh it up if you really want some more sauce on it. So if we have those 2 claps on the last 2 16ths of the measure, we get a nice turnaround. It sounds like this. All right. Now we're getting close to home, right? We've got 8 more measures to go to bring us to the end of our 32 bar. Sorry, we've got 8 more measures to go to bring us to the end of our 32 bar drop idea.
Is that a common count?
Yeah, 32 measures for the most energetic part of your track. That's like a good amount of time. It can vary by genre. So like sometimes your first drop will be only 16 measures, or maybe even only 8 if you got like a really, your track is relatively short. And then your second drop can be twice as long because now your listeners really bought into your world and you have more leeway to give them more of what they what they really want. And I'll show a couple of examples later when we get into song structure, but you can have I also would recommend only only writing as much music as you have something to say. So don't just needlessly extend your drops longer and longer because you can't, because it's really easy to duplicate information on the computer. Think about like, do I have something more to say here? If not, then either end the song or switch it up to a different section, maybe bring the energy down a bit. But just as a starting point, I think 32 bars is a good amount of time. Like if they're really feeling the groove, then they're gonna want to stick with it.
And as a DJ, those multiples are like the Lego blocks, where if you're playing a song you've barely ever heard before, like you'll hear that rhythm, and you'll know like if I'm going to bring guests or something in, I start it now so that the vocal will hit then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. DJs often think in terms of those 8-bar blocks. So making things in multiples of 8, well, powers of 2 and 8. Like 24 bars is kind of a weird amount, but you sometimes get that at like the beginning, where you'll have like 16 bars of intro and then an 8-bar build up and then your drop. These are all rules that can be broken, but for starters, 32 bars is a good amount. Or sometimes you have like progressive trance or like deep house tracks that have extremely long drops. But all right, so let's add. Let's again. We got some options here. Let's introduce another percussion sound here. So I'm taking this slice of my drop that's got the most activity going on, and going to make the next 4 measures here. So just, I don't want to, or another way I could do it is I could just take the last 4 and then duplicate those and then delete this drum fill here. So we talked about the crash cymbal. This is a cymbal that's used to add emphasis to powerful notes. Now let's talk about a ride cymbal. And this is more of a cymbal that you'll kind of play consistently over time. And there's lots of ways you can play it. I think in this genre, the 2 most common are you can put it on every quarter note, or you could put it on every other 8th note to kind of like emphasize that off 8th note and add more power to it. And you kind of create like a washier sound. So an open hat, while it is kind of loose and splashy and long, a ride cymbal really lasts a long time. So let's bring in a ride. Let's get a nice long one. Okay, that's good. All right, so simple idea. We're just creating an audio track. We're just going to put the ride 4x4 with the kick drum. And again, we're going to shorten this up so we don't want it to bleed over. And you could add a little bit of dynamics here too. So make the second one like, slightly quieter. Make the third one a little louder, but not so loud. And then make the fourth one a little bit quieter again. So I have 0, -2, -1, -2. Just create a little bit of dynamics. And then print it all the way. And again, you'll probably say, oh wait, but now the ride is definitely competing with the closed hat, right? Because the ride is like a very high frequency instrument, as you can hear, right? So a couple schools of thought. You could either just delete the closed hat if you wanted, but I think the listener will pick up on that. I think what works fine here is just keep the ride cymbal a little quieter, or you can also put a compressor on all of your drums, which we'll probably want to do anyway, just to make everything tight and punchy and loud. But I wouldn't worry too much about these hitting at the same time. In fact, you can see that in this case, my closed hat sample is peaking a little bit after the ride. So if you can't offset things in frequency, like you want to have 2 high frequency elements playing at the same time, if you adjust them slightly in time so that they're peak transients aren't hitting at the same time, that can be another way to create space here. So right, like my ride cymbal is peaking right here. My closed hat is peaking like a couple milliseconds later. So they're not fighting for headroom as much. So that's good. And again, this will be, you don't have to, you can do this mostly by ear too, like train your ear to notice these subtle differences over time, and you won't have to necessarily do it analytically. But one advantage of computers is now we can really visualize the audio much better, and so we can fine tune these details that can make a big difference potentially. All right, so we've got our ride cymbal 4x4. That's what this sounds like. And that's just, that helps fill out the upper register. And just to show the alternative option, if you adjust it by an eighth note, you get this. And one little cute producer trick I learned recently is this space is empty, right? But let's just clip the second half of the ride cymbal and put it here. And now it'll create that washy techno sound because it'll start with some sound right away and you get this. It's very subtle, but you listen to it enough times to hear it. So yes, the way I did that was I took my chord note pattern, selected it all, moved it over by 1/8 note. Sorry, moved the whole selection over by 1/8 note. Oh, I guess I should naturally clip the end of this one and put it at the beginning here. Right, so it's kind of like I rotated the whole selection around by 1/8 note. Yeah, so difference. The putting the ride on every quarter note is kind of the more hands in the air, mainstream, big room kind of sound, whereas the 8th note ride cymbal is more like a smooth, cool, techno, dark club sort of sound. So you'll pick up on these differences over time. I kind of like the main stage sound. Okay. And then to take us home, in our last few minutes here, let's copy this whole selection. Oops, sorry. Let's get all 4 measures here. And remember how earlier we took out the kick for 2 measures? Now, since idea, let's push it even further. Let's take out the kick for all of the last 4 measures. So switch to automation view with the A button, and then create that same sort of like U rectangle shape, but for the last 4 measures entirely. And this is just one idea. You could, of course, keep the kick going if you like, but this is just to illustrate this turnaround idea. And one thing too, since we're coming to the end of our drop, we usually want some kind of like rising energy sound to kind of like put a bow on it and really like tell the listener, hey, we're coming to the end of our drop now. So classic way to do that is with a sound called a riser. You may have some in your free cymatics packs.
It looks like, yes.
These are some really intense ones. Is there one that's just like noise? For the we can also we can actually just get drift out again, and actually instead of talking about this, which we'll get into automation, let's just grab another snare sample. Not that. Pick one of these cymatics ones. Yeah, okay, that's fine. All right, so now for this last 4 measures, we're gonna we're going to make a snare roll. So we're going to start with create a new audio track. We'll start with quarter notes. So dun, 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 dun. And then for one measure. And then we'll do another measure of quarter notes. Dun, 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 dun. And then we'll speed up. We'll do eighth notes. So eighth notes. Dun, 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 dun. Da, 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 da. And then at the very end, we'll do 16th notes.
Is this right over the top of the section that we just did, or did you?
Oh yeah. So I took. Sorry, let me draw it again. So I took I took that those four measures that we had previously. Right, these with the ride cymbal, and I duplicated those. And I turn
dip and like the kick.
In the automation curve. Well, when you first duplicate them, it won't be there. But then I added it. So I have automation lock turned on. By the way, this button, automation lock, it will, when you copy and paste clips, if this is turned on, it will not touch the automation. It'll just leave it in place, which sometimes you want. If you have it unchecked, then it will copy both the notes and the automation. I tend to leave it turned on just so I can, because I don't want the automation changing without me realizing it that I accidentally changed it. So, so I pulled the kick out, and now I'm adding in this snare roll. And there's a lot of other, we're basically over time, but there's a lot of other ways we can make this snare roll at the end or this riser idea sound more interesting. But for now, we're just gonna do 2 measures of quarter notes. So like that. And then we'll do a single measure of eighth notes. Which you can do by duplicating the quarter notes. And then if you have an eighth note grid turned on, you can just arrow key them back. And then duplicate those eighth notes. And we're going to make 16th notes. So I'm going to change my grid to 1/16. Duplicate them, and then slide these back until I get that. No, wait. No, don't do it this way. That's a bad idea. It's not gonna work. Let's instead just take this sample, make sure it's only 1/16 note long, and then just duplicate it all the way to the end. And then, of course, we want to put our crash cymbal right at the end as well. And maybe we'll put a kick drum as well for emphasis. And by the way, there's the tutorial video that goes deeper into this. Will have has some other examples in it too. So, I know we spent a lot of time on this one, but it helps to see the same ideas kind of presented in a couple different genres. So, all right. So if you add that snare roll idea here, you get this kind of sound. Oh, can you tell us again how to change the timeline? Yes. So if you can zoom in and out, it'll change the grid resolution. If you press Control 1, it will make the grid finer. And if you press Control 2, it'll make it coarser. And that's limited by how you're zoomed, right? So if I'm zoomed in this far, I can go into 30-second notes. If I'm zoomed in this far, I can only go to quarter notes. But I think it's probably Command 1 and Command 2 on Mac. I'll also point out that I know it seems like we're going into a very extreme detail here. There are ways to speed up all of these workflows, but I want to make sure we all understand where everything's coming from and like kind of get a feel for it on a fundamental level before we start using the faster workflows. And eventually, like, I know it took us like an hour to put this together, but eventually this will take you like 10 minutes. Or you'll use loops or pre-made samples that maybe you've put together in a separate session. So I know it seems kind of slow now, but this is just to really drive in that muscle memory and show us really close up what we're trying to achieve here. So so we've increased the energy gradually over time, so the listener stays engaged. We've done it by adding in these new elements over time, both new drum samples and speeding up existing ones, or speeding up the bass line in this case. And then we added these turnarounds, these drum fills where we change up the rhythm a little bit, or add like a flash to signify that, hey, we're turning things around, or it's not even signifying something. It is doing that. Like, music is the only artistic medium where it doesn't stand for anything else. It just is itself. So this is just like an effective artistic gesture. There's a quote from, God, what is that guy's name? All art aspires to the condition of music. It's something like this. Yeah, Walter Potter. And read into this more if you like. But music is goated. That's all I'm going to say. All right. I know we're a little bit over time, but any final questions before we conclude? So I'll send out the focus tutorial after this. The homework is, of course, going to be to make your own 32-bar drop in any style you like. Take a song that you like and maybe try to emulate its changes in energy. I know we didn't get super deep into like complicated bass lines. We'll do some more of that, or like different sort of bass lines other than just steady static notes. But we'll get more into those in some of the later examples as well. And we'll definitely move beyond house music. I'm just choosing this because it's like simple to illustrate the basic ideas. Yeah, so one step closer to making your own remix of Justice.
Just over a week ago, I barely had Ableton installed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy how much you're helping create in a class. That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's awesome doing it in a class and hearing everyone else's questions and like things I wouldn't think to ask.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad y'all are enjoying it.
It took me about